Okay, today we will do the last topic of our Unit 3 of CC14, that is Development Economics. What I understand from the topic given in the syllabus, we are supposed to cover Amartya Sen's article named Peasants and Dualism with or without Surplus Labor. Now, I hope all of you have downloaded the article. As I told you, you can download it by logging into your Enlist account and going to JSTOR and typing the name of the article will give you the article itself. You download the article and have a look at the article. I have prepared a simplified version of the main article for your understanding. So here what we have, these terms are actually familiar to you by now, that is dualism, surplus labor, etc. So we want to find the equilibrium of a peasant family in a dual economy where surplus labor may be present. So we begin with the equilibrium of a peasant family. We begin with the simplest model. Now we are talking in terms of the simplest model in a sense that we are thinking of an economy or a community of identical peasant families with alpha working members and beta total members. Naturally, alpha is greater than beta is greater than equal to alpha, and with a given stock of land and capital. So when beta is equal to alpha, all are working members. Otherwise, some members are working, some are not. Now, the family output, capital Q, at a given point of time is a function of labor, L alone, and the function is smooth, twice differentiable throughout, and normal, that is with diminishing marginal productivity of labor. So we have the normal production function as we have been studying it from our initial courses, that is output Q is a function of labor L with diminishing marginal productivity. That is, the first derivative of this function is marginal product. That you know is obviously greater than 0, maybe greater than 0, but the second derivative is less than 0. That means the marginal product is diminishing. Now, marginal productivity of labor is assumed either to become 0 for a finite value of labor L bar with the maximum output Q bar. That is, max of this output or production function is QL bar, where Q dash L bar is equal to 0. You know, for maximum or minimum, the first derivative is equal to 0. We are saying only that and nothing else over here. Or marginal productivity is assumed to approach 0 asymptotically. Or that may be written as limit L tends to infinity, Q dash L is equal to 0. So at the limit Q dash L or marginal product approaches 0. See how COVID has come into all our conversations. I cannot pronounced asymptotically properly, it becomes asymptomatically, as we are using this term over and over again these days. So we find that our life has totally changed, and we are living in a new normal situation where online classes are going on, and we are repeating terms in terms of COVID-19. This is what is happening to us. Now, the peasants aim to maximize the happiness of the family. The peasants have not heard of difficulties of interpersonal comparisons of utility and make such comparisons blatantly. They know that every member of the family has a personal utility function U, which is a function of individual income, small q, and every working member has a disutility function V related to his individual labor L, and the functions U and V are of the same shape for everyone. The marginal utility from income is positive and non-increasing, and marginal disutility from income is non-negative and non-decreasing. This you know from your earlier knowledge. That is, utility function is u function of q, with the first derivative is greater than 0, that marginal utility is t is positive, and the rate of change of increase of marginal utility is less than equal to 0. Now, for the disutility function also, it is greater than equal to, the marginal disutility is greater than equal to 0, and the second derivative is again greater than equal to 0. So, it means that as our labor increases, the disutility also increases. Each person's notion of family welfare W is given by the net utility from income and effort of all members taken together, attaching the same weight to everyone's happiness, attaching subscript I to the utility or disutility of the ith individual. The following expression for welfare W is obtained. That is, W summation over 1 to beta ui, that is, there are beta family members, and from that we subtract summation 1 to alpha vi, because there are alpha family members who work. Now, this is our assumption that work is equally divided between working members and income equally between all members. That is, it is not that the people who work get a higher share of income and people who do not work get a lower share of income. No. Work is equally divided between working members, and income is also equally divided between all members. When the marginal utility of income is strictly diminishing and the marginal disutility of labor is strictly increasing, egalitarian distribution will be the only one consistent with welfare maximization. I hope you know the meaning of egalitarian, where all are get equal share. That is egalitarian. So L is equal, total labor is equal to number of working members alpha into L, individual effort of all the working members. Now, sorry for the interruption. Q or capital Q or total output is divided equally among all the members of the family. So our welfare function becomes beta into U minus alpha into V. So we have, since we have assumed egalitarian distribution of income and work, we can write equation 6 as equation 9. Now, for maximization of family welfare, we all know that DWDL should be equal to 0. Now, it's a very simple differentiation, and putting it equal to 0, I think you'll all be able to do this differentiation, and you must do it yourself. You will get Q dash L, or marginal product of labor, is equal to V dash L or marginal disutility of effort over marginal utility of effort. We have termed it as X. Now, what is X? X is defined as the real cost of labor. What do we mean by that? It is given by the individual rate of indifferent substitution between income and labor. So the rule given by 10 implies that labor will be applied to the point where is marginal product, that is Q dash L, is equal to the real cost of labor. Now, given 1, 4, and 5, it can be verified that the second order conditions are also fulfilled. What is 1? The nature of the production function, and 4 and 5 give us the nature of the utility and disutility functions. Now, two methods of implementation of Rule 10 are possible. First, the head of the family takes the decision on behalf of the entire family and tells the individual members what to do. That is, tells the working members how much to work, tells the and distributes the total output equally among all members. Now, each work, or number 2 is, each working member is free to decide how much to work, but since he equates the interest of the other family members with his own, he is guided by equation 10. What does it imply? It implies he equates his personal disutility from work, that is V dash L, not with his personal utility from his own share of marginal product. What is his own share of marginal product? Q dash L into U dash Q divided by beta, that is his own share of marginal product. He does not do that. What does he do? He equates his personal marginal utility from work, that is V dash L, to this times beta, that is only Q dash L into U dash Q, which is the family's total gain from extra unit of his effort. Now, since Q double dash L is less than 0 throughout, not only Q dash L is a function of L, but L is also a function of Q, which implies that the inverse function exists. But Q dash L equals the real cost of labor at each point of equilibrium, that is x, which implies that the value of total family labor employed can be expressed as a function of the real labor cost given equilibrium. Similarly, the value of total family output and income can also be expressed as a function of the real labor cost. So, what are we actually saying? We are saying that L is equal to phi function of marginal product of labor, which is in turn equal to the real cost of labor x. So L is a phi function of x. Now similarly, Q is a psi function of x. Now phi and psi are decreasing functions of x. What does it imply? It implies a higher equilibrium real labor cost goes with lower volume of total family labor and output. That is, higher x means lower output or higher x means lower L. Now we come to another type of peasant economy. Here we were saying that the peasants produce for their home consumption, for their own consumption. Now we come to production for a market. Peasant economies often rely significantly on the sale of their products to markets. If the products are cash crops like jute, rubber, cocoa, the whole of the product might be sold. The amount of product Q may be exchanged for an amount C of products directly consumed by the peasants. We relate individual utility to the individual share of this C, and correspondingly modified our previous utility expression equation, keeping it, however, of the same analytical type with positive non-decreasing marginal utility. So we now have utility function to be u function of C with first derivative and second derivative, first derivative is greater than 0 and second derivative is less than equal to 0. So the peasants are assumed to face a competitive market for the product, and the price of output in terms of the commodity C is taken to be P per unit. So if we directly consume C, we buy amount C, which is equal to Q into P, where P is price per unit. Now, that is equal to beta into C. Everyone consumes C, small c amount of that purchase commodity. All beta members consume the same amount. So we have this equation 14. The allocation rule for maximization of all family welfare is still given by equation 9, and we have a slight modified nature of the equilibrium condition obtained in equation 10. Now, the right-hand side represents the real labor cost. That means marginal rate of indifference substitution between labor and product, bearing in mind the rate at which the product can be substituted for the commodity C. The intuitive meaning of the allocation rule remains very similar to that of 10. Now we come to a somewhat more complicated case where a part of the product Q is sold in the market and a part is consumed directly. Now, I want to ask you whether you've understood up till here. Have you understood the nature of the peasant economy and how equilibrium is obtained in case of a simple economy? Have you understood? No response? No one's there? No one there? বুঝতে পেরেছো? আচ্ছা। So, as I was saying, we move on to a more complicated case where a part of the product Q is sold in the market and a part is consumed directly. Let Y, small y, stand for the proportion of the production of output that is marketed, and C, the amount of purchase commodity enjoyed per member of the peasant family. Q for the amount of the self-produced output enjoyed per member of the family. That is, they are enjoying their own product and they are purchasing another product from the market. We have a more complicated individual utility function involving both C, small c, and small q. We assume that there is non-increasing marginal utility for each good when the amount of it is increased in isolation or when both the goods are raised in the same proportion. However, there is no satiety level for either goods, that at no point of time do the family members feel that they are fully satisfied. And that is, they do not want any more of that good. So we have the same utility function, however complicated this may look, but it is very simple. You know the nature of this kind of utility functions. Now, the amount of own produce product consumed by each family member is small q, and how is that obtained? It is obtained by getting the amount left behind after selling Y proportion of their production Q in the market and dividing it by beta, we will get small q. Now, how do we get small c? Small c is obtained by purchasing this amount. How can they purchase? Because they are selling Y proportion of their own produce at price P. So this is the total amount of C they can purchase. This divided by beta will give us the small c, which is the individual consumption of purchase good. Now, for maximization of family welfare, we now have two variables. One is labor and the second variable Y is the proportion of output sold in the market. So for maximization, dWdL and dWdy is set equal to 0. Now our welfare function was this, so we do simple differentiation and set it equal to 0 and get this as one condition for maximization of family welfare. That is, UQ is equal to UCP. Now, the carrying out the second differentiation, dWdl equal to 0, and substituting the first order condition here, and then simplifying it further to get that marginal product of labor is equal to the marginal disutility of work over marginal utility from income. So these are the two conditions of, that is 19 and 20 are the two conditions of equilibrium of a peasant family who partly consume their own produce and partly consume the product purchased from the market in exchange of their own produce. Now we come to the circumstances under which surplus labor can exist. Now we have repeatedly discussed about the circumstances under which surplus labor can exist. We have gone through their definitions a number of times, but here also we say surplus labor is that part of the labor force in the peasant economy that can be removed without reducing the total amount of output produced, even when the amount of other factors is not changed. If the reduction in the working population reduces the amount of labor put into cultivation, then clearly there would be a reduction in amount of output produced. So when we withdraw labor, there should not be any reduction in total output. If that happens, then only surplus labor can exist. Continually diminishing marginal productivity of labor given by equation 1 implies that a reduction in total family labor will make the marginal product curve of labor positive, even if it were 0 to start with, so that a smaller volume of L will mean a smaller volume of output. Even if we had 0 marginal product at the beginning, continually diminishing marginal productivity implies that smaller volume of labor means smaller volume of output. That means what is necessary for the existence of surplus labor under these circumstances is that a fall in the number of working members alpha should be compensated by a rise in the amount of work done per person. This also we have discussed with the help of a diagram when we were discussing Sen's definition of disguised unemployment or surplus labor. So, the necessary condition for existence of surplus labor under these circumstances is that a fall in the number of working members alpha should be compensated by a rise in the amount of work done per person. This will happen only if the real labor cost is insensitive to the withdrawal of part of the population. Now, what was our real labor cost? X. We will discuss in detail the case of peasant economy in isolation, or the simplest model, because the debate has usually been in the context of such a case. Now, Q is equal to psi function of Q dash L is equal to psi x. This we have seen earlier from our equation 12. Now, relation 12 shows that a reduction in output can only occur when real labor cost rises. When X rises, output will fall. We have seen this before in equation 12. And in consequence of a reduction in the population, such a rise in real labor cost can take place for two different reasons. To understand this, we have to recall what we meant by real labor cost. That was, it was V dash L over UQ. So O, the marginal rate of indifference substitution between labor and income. So, in consequence of a reduction in population, a rise in real labor costs can take place for two different reasons. An emigration of labor from the family reduces the number of working members alpha, and to maintain the same level of total family labor, each remaining member has to work longer. This will lead to rising of marginal disutility of effort. That means the numerator rises of the real labor cost rises. What is the other point? The other point is withdrawal of labor leads to a rise in income of the remaining members, because there will be a smaller number of people to share the family income. This leads to the reduction of the marginal utility of income. Now, both these effects will lead to an increase in the real labor cost. That means it will reduce the output. This will reduce the output or shift the equilibrium to a smaller volume of family labor and total output. The existence of surplus labor depends on the marginal utility schedule and the marginal disutility schedule being flat in the relevant region. Only under that circumstance will a rise in income leave the marginal utility unchanged, and a rise in individual effort have the marginal disutility unaffected. So, in the relevant region, we want to see a condition where marginal disutility of effort is constant, as well as marginal utility derived from income is constant. The constancy of marginal utility of income within a certain range implies and insensitivity of the usefulness of income to its quantity within this region. Given this assumption, with suitable choice of units, we can make the constant value of marginal utility equal to unity, so that condition 10 reduces to the following. That is, marginal product is equal to V dash L is equal to X, the real cost of labor. What have we done? We have assumed that this is constant, as well as marginal utility of income is constant, and we have chosen some units so as to the marginal utility of income is constant and equal to 1. If furthermore marginal disutility of effort remains constant, say at value Z, until a certain critical amount of effort L star is reached, we have this. What? X is equal to V dash L is equal to a constant value Z, which is greater than 0 for L less than equal to L star, and V double dash L greater than 0 for L greater than L star. So up till L star, this is constant. At that is marginal disutility of effort is constant at Z until the critical amount of effort L star is reached. Assume that the withdrawal of labor in question starts in a situation when the amount of labor put in by each working member in a family is L. Implies the total family labor is alpha into L. If L is greater than L star, there cannot be any surplus labor in this model. Now, if L is less than L star and withdrawal of labor can take place in divisible units, then some labor can be removed without affecting output. If on the other hand, it is assumed that labor can be withdrawn only in units of one person, now this rules out part-time or outside work, and it violates the twice differentiability condition of the V function at L is equal to L star. And if reorganization of land labor allocation cannot take place after withdrawal of labor from some families, then the necessary and sufficient condition for existence of surplus labor becomes alpha by alpha minus 1, L is less than L star. So here we cannot withdraw labor in divisible units. If, however, land can be reallocated after the transfer of labor, and if there are very large number of families, then the necessary and necessary condition for the existence of surplus labor approximates that quoted in the divisible case, namely L less than L star. I hope it's clear here. Up till here it's clear. We are just saying that the conditions for where underweight surplus labor exist is L less than L star, and if we cannot withdraw labor in divisible units, it's then alpha by alpha minus 1, L less than L star, then only surplus labor can exist. Here we have not talked in terms of value of marginal productivity. It's clear up till here? বুঝেছো সবাই?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now we analyze the assumptions underlying surplus labor. Now, existence of surplus labor in this model of rational allocation depends on the flatness of the schedule of marginal disutility of effort and schedule of marginal utility of income in the relevant regions. Of the two, perhaps the assumption of the flat marginal disutility schedule up to a critical value is less objectionable. The flatness of The schedule of marginal utility of income until a certain standard of living is reached may be thought to be more dubious. However, near the so-called level of subsistence, the end of having a decent standard of living has not yet been achieved, and such non-diminution of desire to earn more income may not be difficult to believe. It is a verifiable question, and more empirical work is called for to settle it. Regarding the necessity of the two assumptions for existence of surplus labor, a couple of reservations may be made. If the taxation system is such that the rise in income per head as a result of departure of some members of the family is wiped away by extra taxes, then there will be no rise in net income per head, and the question of the invariance of marginal utility with respect to variations in income will not arise. This will happen if Knox's scheme of utilizing the so-called saving potential is carried out through an appropriate system of taxation. This we have discussed in one of previous lectures too. In Knox's words, some form of collective saving enforced by the state may provide to be indispensable for mobilization of the saving potential implicit in disguised unemployment. We find further that even the existence of disguised unemployment and of the so-called saving potential may depend on taxation or other methods of state interference unless the marginal utility schedule is flat in the relevant region. Now, coming to the second issue, the flatness of the two schedules is necessary in this model only because utility from income and disutility from work are taken to be independent of each other. They do not depend on each other. If we take net utility as a function jointly of income and work, and we have to look not only at the double partial derivatives which we have been doing so far, but also on the cross partial derivatives between income and work. For example, if it is argued that marginal disutility from work is less at higher income, it is possible, since work may be less tiring when a person is well fed, then it is no longer necessary to assume that the marginal utility of income and marginal disutility of work are constant with respect to variations in income and work respectively. We do not need then the flatness of the two schedules. All that is needed is the invariance of labor cost X with respect to joint variations of income and work per person when the size of the family is reduced and given a joint utility function. This can come about in a variety of different ways. That is not our concern here. Now we ask the question again. We do not ask now because we already know that whether existence of zero marginal productivity is necessary or sufficient for the existence of surplus labor. We have already discussed it. Here we are just summing it up. The existence of surplus labor is sometimes identified with zero marginal product of labor. It is in this form that the doctrine has been most widely discussed and strongly attacked. In this model, the situation corresponds to a special case when you remember Q dashed L is equal to V dashed L is equal to Z. We have had an equation like this when we had chosen some units to make UQ equal to 1. So at that point, the value of Z is equal to 0 when marginal disutility of labor is nil in the relevant region. So in this model, zero marginal productivity occurs as a special case when the value of Z is equal to 0, that is when the marginal disutility of labor is nil in the relevant region. Now, the assumption of zero marginal productivity is neither necessary nor sufficient condition for the existence of surplus labor. We see from the above analysis that is not necessary, since we have come and derived the condition for the existence of surplus labor as L less than L star, when labor can be withdrawn in divisible units. So in the coming to that condition, we never found it necessary. So we derived the condition for existence of surplus labor without the assumption of zero marginal productivity. Now coming to the sufficiency part. It is also not sufficient. That it is not sufficient follows from the condition that when Z is equal to 0 but L is equal to L star, so at that point in time we do not have surplus labor. That is when marginal product of labor is 0, but a finite withdrawal of peasant labor will reduce the level of output. So, we began our discussion on surplus labor and disguised unemployment with Knox's concept of zero marginal productivity of labor, and we have found that the marginal product of labor being zero is neither necessary nor sufficient for existence of surplus labor. It is not necessary because we have derived the condition for the existence of surplus labor without assuming marginal product of labor being 0. It's not sufficient because we can have a condition, a situation where we may have zero marginal product, but surplus labor may not exist. So zero marginal productivity is neither necessary nor sufficient for the existence of surplus labor. Now this brings us to the end of the discussion on surplus labor, and we have completed the entire unit 3 of our CC14 paper. So if you have any questions, you can ask.